Welcome back, troops, to Let's Tab 59. I hope you're all well. So, civil defence in the UK, civil defence in the United Kingdom. I want to chat to you about what we had in the past, what we had more recently, and what have we got today, if anything. So let's go back to 1935, leading up to World War II. 1935, the government decided we needed something, and so they formed the ARP, the Air Raid Precautions, and they had various duties, and I'll get onto that. But come the start of the Second World War in 1939, they renamed this unit as the Civil Defence General Services. And basically what they had within that was various sections. They had people dealing with first aid, blah, blah, blah. The old ARPs are still there going around, making sure the wardens, making sure you get your blackouts up, directing people to shelters, looking after people in the shelters, administering minor first aid, putting out small fires, all those sort of general duties throughout the Second World War. In fact, there was almost 2 million, I think, around 2 million people served in that civil defence general services. They lost 7,000. 7,000 were killed during the Second World War in various ways, as you can imagine, the Blitz, etc. 7,000, that's quite a few people. Obviously it was much needed and it was useful. They also had, during that Second World War, a youth section. If you were aged between 15 to 18, you could volunteer for that. And you were mainly used as a runner or just a general dog's body, I suppose, a runner or a messenger if communications went down. Because these ARPs, these wardens, used to check in. They were at regional level. Actually, each sort of section was run by the councils. The local councils sort of had to administrate them. And they were used, like I say, if comms broke down, they used to ring in by phone to their head office or to let them know what's going on in their area, so they could deploy whatever they needed. And if comms went down, they'd use these messengers, these 15 to 18 year olds, as runners. So World War II ends. In fact, just short of the end of World War II, just before VE Day, the government binned it. The volunteers, they were all volunteers, they weren't paid, and I think there was a few higher up members in the organisation paid, but in general these defence volunteers weren't paid. And obviously they were part-timers, because most of them, not all of them, but most of them would have had a job. So they've worked part-time doing this, various shifts. So they got disbanded because the government felt they were no longer needed. War was coming to an end, or more or less ended in Europe. We weren't getting bombed anymore. And so they got binned. And of course also, you know, money was tight. And although these were unpaid volunteers, just the actual organisation itself was costing money, and there was no need for it. So the government binned it, and they were disbanded. However, as time went on, later on in the 40s, when the emergence of tensions started to grow between East and West, the Cold War was beginning to happen, if you like, they decided we needed something because there was another threat. And so they were reformed, but this time they were called the Civil Defence Corps. The Civil Defence Corps, and they were formed in 1948, I believe. But they didn't last long. They didn't last long. We started the Observer Corps. Royal Observer Corps was kicking around, started to kick around again. But they only lasted till 1968. This is Civil Defence Corps. In 1968, we believe, mainly because of budgetary problems again with the government, they binned it. So that got dissolved in 1968. After which, we pretty much had nothing as a civil defence to aid the emergency services in the outbreak of war. Now, during that period between 1948 and 1968, when the Civil Defence Corps was active, they were only going to be used in wartime. They weren't used for anything to do with civil disasters. However, a few individuals did assist in various things. There was a big train crash in the 50s at Willesden, quite a big disaster there, and some individuals helped out on that. And some also went down to, or were in South Wales, when we had the Aberfan disaster with a big coal slag heap above a village due to the weather, come sliding down, took out a school, killed a lot of kids and teachers and some civilians in the area. Massive disaster. And some individuals from the Civil Defence Corps were used for that. But in 1968 it was knocked on the head and we had nothing. Well then, the military itself has always had CIMIC or MACA, military aid to the civil authorities. So if there's a disaster, then the military can step in and help out. They can mobilise, if you like. And after 9/11, when that disastrous attack, that horrible, hideous attack in 9/11 happened in America, the British government turned around to the emergency services and said, if we had something like that happen here in the UK, I know we had 7/7, but it wasn't, it was horrific, but it wasn't on the scale of 9/11, obviously. So the government said, what if we have a similar thing to 9/11 here in the UK? Could your emergency services deal with it? And they said no. They absolutely no, we couldn't. So the government turned to the MOD and said, what can you do? Come up with a plan. So what the MOD did, they came up with forming BRTs, Brigade Reinforcement Teams. So each regional brigade in the UK would have these BRT soldiers bolted onto them at their brigade headquarters. Now the people they asked for were volunteers. They were, back in those days, territorial army soldiers and officers. So if you had previous service in any of the three services, regular or reserve, you could approach the regional brigade area if you were close enough and join the BRT. And basically you went back into the territorial army on a much lower commitment. And you kept your rank from your previous service on the whole, mainly on the whole. They were bolted onto these regional brigades, as I say. Now their job was basically to act as a liaison between the civil emergency services and the army, the military. So for instance, they might be posted at either bronze, silver or gold headquarters during a disaster. And they were thinking of a terrorist attack, to be honest, from the main. And what they could do was, if there was a massive disaster and the civil emergency services needed aid from the military, these BRT officers and warrant officers could act as liaison and find the bit of kit that was needed, see if the military got that piece of kit. So if there was some heavy lifting equipment needed that the civil authorities didn't have, the civil emergency services didn't have, the Royal Engineers might have had that piece of kit. And so these, once they were requested, the BRT guy could then go to the military and go, right, we need this bit of kit, and he'd organise it and get it down there. That was the idea with the BRT. They were formed, as I say, after 9/11. I'm not sure what year it was kicked into touch, but it certainly it got disbanded while I was serving. Back in 2015 I left, and I think before that. So it didn't last long, these BRTs. So we had that. Once that got knocked on the head, there isn't any civil defence. There's nothing. However, I believe it was 2013, so just over 10 years ago, an individual, I think he's definitely a veteran, he decided to form a civilian organisation along the lines of the Civil Defence Corps. They call themselves the Joint Civil Defence Volunteers. I think that's their full title. Joint Civilian Defence Volunteers. As I say, they've moulded themselves along that. They're set up regionally in small teams, which they call rally points. Now this organisation I'm talking about, you can Google them. In fact, I think they've got a little bit on YouTube. Quite interesting. I'm not sure. I think the heart's in the right place, but I don't think it's going to come to much. They've got these RPs, these rally points dotted around the country, and if you go onto their website, you can see if there's one in your area. If it's something you'd be interested in, have a look, contact them. They are actively recruiting all the time. They're a charity, as I say, they get no funding from the government. They are asking for people, they'll take anybody pretty much as a volunteer, but if you have got a specialist trade, if you're ex-military, ex-emergency services, then they're definitely looking for people like that to join them. I think they've got a few already. I don't know their current strength. It's not great, it's not big. They haven't got a lot of money, a lot of funding, so they don't have a lot of equipment. I don't think they've actually got any premises at all. They don't have any dedicated huts or infrastructure. So I'm not sure on that side. I haven't delved too deep into it. But I think the heart's in the right place, but I don't think at the moment anyway they're going to get anywhere. Not without funding, and that's always going to be the hurdle. The government can't pay them to do this. They have a uniform, which is obviously self-funded, I suppose. They wear like blue overalls, a big set of blue boiler suit, if you like, with various badges on it telling what they do. And they wear, strangely, a bright orange beret with their own cap badge that they've made up. And they wear that. They've got, again, a couple of vehicles. I think it's the actual volunteers themselves have privately purchased vehicles, and like Ford Rangers and things like that. I think they've got an ambulance. I think they've got a small fire tender in one of the locations. But they've been going over 10 years now, and it doesn't seem to be growing very well. They've got they've got a whole list on their website of what skills they're looking for, including, and this is quite strange, including intelligence. Intelligence. I'm not sure what they mean by that. They don't really expand on it. Security people, dog handlers, they want a dog section. They want firefighters, they want first aiders. They're trying to do what the old Civil Defence Corps did. Certainly the Civil Defence Corps after World War II, the one that formed in 48 to 68. So going along those lines. But it does seem a little bit strange. I think the heart's in the right place, as I say. Now, that's all there is at the moment. This really is a small outfit of people trying to do something because there's no government funding. But of course, what we have got is the British Red Cross. We've got the British Red Cross. They're there to, in event of emergencies and disasters, they help out. St John's Ambulance, another one. They can do some good. You've still got the Women's Royal Voluntary Service, or maybe it's not called Women's anymore, maybe it's just now the Royal Volunteer Service, because it's all inclusive, isn't it? So we have got bits and pieces that could be brought in, but in the event of a war, a conventional or nuclear war, we don't have anything apart from the military, really. And as I say, you've got the Red Cross, etc. So we've always had G9. G9 is the military aid to civil authority. That still exists at all the regional brigade headquarters. So they can call on, if the civilian population, civilian emergency services, local councils, whatever, need assistance in a certain disaster, be it war or natural, then G9 can step in. And you've seen this in the past with the flooding over recent years. We've had these terrible floods. You see Chinook helicopters on the news coming in, dropping off massive sandbags as flood defences, etc. And you see troops wading through water, helping to evacuate people from their homes. So we have got that as a civil defence, I suppose. But again, if we were in a war situation in this country, I mean a proper war, a conventional war, where the mainland was threatened with bombing or attacks of some form, we haven't got anything other than what I've just said to look after that. So I'd be interested in what you guys and girls think about the state of, should we have something? We haven't got any money, have we? The government can't fund it, so I can't see us, but do we need something like that, like the old Civil Defence Corps? And also, what's your thoughts on this? Have a look, go online. I'll try and put a link actually to the website of this this joint Civil Defence Force volunteers, or what they're called. I'll put a link in there. Have a look at that and tell me what you think of these people. They have been getting some stick online. I've seen some comments a bit savoury. I'm not going to repeat them on here. I say I think the heart's in the right place, but I'd be interested in you to have a look at it and come back and tell me in the comments what you think about them as well as do we need something. I think we possibly do need something, but I think it's got to be government funded. This private enterprise that these people are doing, this private unfunded charity, I don't think it's going to have enough oomph to do anything. It's just not going to grow. Anyway, that's all I want to chat about. Beautiful day here, as you can see. I'm going to crack on. If you're new to my channel and you haven't subscribed, please consider it. I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider it. But until next time, troops, stay safe and remember, let's tab.